Bob Pulver. In this episode, I'm joined by Edie Goldberg, author, future of work expert, and chairman of the SHRM Foundation. Edie emphasizes the importance of talent marketplaces and skills-based hiring to create equal opportunities based on skills rather than connections. She advocates for implementing systems that facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion, and highlights the need for skills assessments to unlock the potential in diverse talent pools. Additionally, we discuss the challenges of internal talent marketplaces, the necessity of a holistic talent ecosystem strategy, and the role of AI in improving decision-making, as well as operational efficiency. As you'll hear in each episode, I ask all my esteemed guests what they recommend to elevate one's AIQ, so look out for Edie's recommendations. Hope you enjoy my chat with Edie. Hello, welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today is Edie Goldberg. She is a future of work expert and author and chairman of the board of the SHRM Foundation. She's got a lot of titles, wears a lot of hats. Edie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's the ultimate portfolio career. I just do a lot of different things.
There you go. There you go. That's how we do it. So Edie, why don't you just give our listeners just a quick rundown of maybe how you got to be wearing all the hats that you wear today?
Sure. So, kind of way back, I was a small child now. I have a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. So I kind of call that my grounding. So I'm very much a evidence-based practitioner, if you will. But I have been an HR management consultant for I think about 35 years now. And I've had my own business for 23 of those. So started off with a boutique management consulting firm, worked for Towers Parent. I was a global thought leader in the human capital practice. And then I started doing my own thing, if you will. And my work really focuses on helping companies to attract, engage, retain talent and driving performance of the organization. I really kind of got into focusing on the future of work. I think it was back in like 2016. I was working with a big group of amazing, mostly CHROs, some academics and thought leaders, really thinking about the future of work and how do we in HR need to think about approaching work differently and meeting the needs of our companies differently. And that has obviously infused a lot of what I do. But then so that's like my day job, if you will. I do a lot of keynote speaking based on books that I've written or articles that I write. I advise 3 HR tech companies, and I am the chair of the board of the SHRM Foundation. So lots of hats, lots of different things to do, and I'm never bored.
So your book Inside Gig is, I think, what first brought us together. I had done quite a bit of, I guess, internal crowdsourcing in my days at IBM before there was a gig economy. But I think when you and Kelly wrote that book and we started, I guess it opened my eyes to the fact that this is really happening. Like people are waking up. I never had an official HR role, but I was always, playing on the outskirts, covering, people, process, and technology. And on some level, the concept just seems so logical to me. Like, why would you let your people leave and then start all over again, recruiting, trying to backfill? If you actually care about your people, why wouldn't you want to see them succeed? And if they're not, achieving what you thought they could, maybe there's some underlying reason. It's not that they're not capable. Maybe it's just not the ideal fit, square peg in a round hole kind of thing. And so maybe we could just talk a little bit about that book in particular. It happens to resonate really well with me, and obviously with talent marketplaces as a software platform, that's still one of the hot areas within HR tech.
Yeah, it's like this huge explosion of interest in internal talent mobility and talent marketplaces, obviously. The first inkling of this idea really came for me. I was partnering with an outplacement company called RiceSmart, now acquired by Ronstadt. And we were looking at, it's kind of ironic and interesting how companies have, employees going out one door and then they're hiring employees in, through the back door. and they're not really looking at the skills of their employees to see if they can be repurposed. And that was initially where part of that idea came from. It also came from what I would say, my very personal experiences when I was at Towers Perrin and I was in the human capital practice, but they started a measurement practice. And, I'm an industrial psychologist by training. I had years of statistics and research methods, and I was a trained researcher, and they were starting projects that were developing surveys and doing research for company, and I thought, well, I'd like to do that, but we were kind of a siloed organization, and I couldn't do that because I was in a different practice area. And I thought, well, why not bring joy to my life? Like, why not let me work on that other project? And so you start to realize how companies underutilize the talent that they have. And then we started working on this big future of work initiative. And actually, since you mentioned IBM, Diane Gearson, who was then the CHRO at IBM, was one of the initial leaders of this group. We ultimately called ourselves Create, which was like the global consortium to reimagine HR, employment, and talent in the enterprise or something like that. It was a long time. And we were thinking about how people are going to have to work differently, how work models are changing, how HR and the skill sets within HR need to change. But this idea of skills shifting within the organization, and how do we need to change our talent processes? So Kelly was also part of that group, my co-author, Kelly Stephen Weiss. And she said to me, Edie, I've got this idea. I think I know how we can work differently within my company here, Technologies, but it fundamentally disrupts everything that we do about talent. So I need you to help me write a whole new talent operating model for operating this way. And so that's how Kelly and I came together to do this work, and we did it. And it was hugely impactful in their organization. We had we had estimated, by people participating in projects outside of their day-to-day job, when you calculate the compensation that the company was effectively, if you will, saving by not hiring an external contractor to do that work or hiring another employee, when they only counted projects people were working on outside of their normal P&L, they estimated their cost savings to be $14 million, based on the fact that people who are already their employees were contributing to these projects, and they were doing it because they were interested in learning new things. They were interested in leveraging skills that they had that they didn't use in their day job, or they wanted to apply in a different context. It was something they were passionate and interested about. It was a career they wanted to explore. All these different reasons. And then we saw this like massive impact. Employee engagement in the company went way up. This is a technology company, so having people contribute on a project from different disciplines was really important for facilitating innovation. So we have this really successful thing, and we wanted to write about it. And I was going to originally write an HBR article on this. And one of the editors said, no, 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 it's a much bigger story than that. You have to write a book. And so that's how the book, The Inside Gig, came about. But Kelly and I were really on a mission to help companies change the way they work and understand how to better leverage the talent that they have. And everything that we've done since then has been kind of in service of that mission.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I guess one of the things that I've noticed, and I mean, you would know this better than me, but as much as so Kelly created Hitch, which is now part of ServiceNow. But the Hitch people that followed closely behind Hitch was Fuel 50 and Eightfold and some of these other vendors who created internal talent marketplaces. Despite that, it seems like there's still a lot of organizations who have not taken that approach, and maybe they have other ways of sort of managing, internal mobility and skills or whatever. But if you look at what a modern full featured talent marketplace incorporates, it really is such an amazing hub of intelligence and knowledge and way the organization is working and the skills gaps and connections to learning and professional development and extracurriculars or looking for maybe even looking for mentors or coaches or whatever. It just seems like there's such incredible value to be untapped and unleashed. How could you not how could you not invest in something like that? I mean, what's holding companies back?
What's holding companies back is a couple things. One is it's kind of a big change in how you operate.
Hi, I'm Stephen Rothberg,
And I'm Jeanette Leeds.
and together we're the co hosts of the High Volume Hiring Podcast.
Are you involved in hiring dozens or even hundreds of employees a year? If so, you know that the typical sourcing tools, tactics, and strategies, they just don't scale.
Yeah, our bi weekly podcast features news, tips, case studies, and interviews with the world's leading experts about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to high volume hiring.
Make sure to subscribe today.
And I will admit that most companies implement it strictly for career development purposes, and the gigs people are able to sign up for are on top of their day job. So with people already kind of overworked and stressed out, companies are saying, we can't add on to what people are doing. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you look at the employee engagement data, we know that there is a lot of productivity time that's being left on the table because if we're not engaged, we're not as productive. So we do believe that this is a path to greater productivity, and those companies that have implemented it have had that productivity lift within their company. But the other issue, and it's probably the biggest challenge to implementing this, is the mindset of managers who kind of, if you will, covet and hoard their talent, and they don't want to share. They don't want to let their employees explore that other opportunity. Now, that's not what employees want. And they're going to go leave your company and go to another job to get that opportunity if you're hoarding them. But, this is kind of the ultimate talent strategy for retaining talent, developing talent, increasing productivity by allowing people to choose the work that interests them. In the book, Kelly and I talk about the best way to optimize your talent is to understand what skills people have and what work they're interested in doing. And we think that you should, break work into tasks and then move work around for people to operate at their maximum level rather than just simply adding on a development experience, which is, again, I would say 90% of companies implementing a talent marketplace do it simply to connect people to mentors, to allow people to opt in for development opportunities, explore career options, etc. But I think the highest and best use is really around creating organizational agility. So we have a different framework around that, and that's what you get to, see if you read the Inside Gig. But I think it's fear of change and the unknown. People also think it's this horribly incredible lift. We talk about the skills based organization, and everyone thinks you have to change everything to become a skills based organization. And the answer is you can do a few discrete things that, with AI and machine learning, we can kind of extract a lot of data pretty easily. You're the expert in this, Bob, not me. So I'd like you to follow up on that. But you don't have to do this like 2 years. How do we define all the skills in our company, project? I think we could pretty easily scrape that data from both people's LinkedIn profiles, their resumes, the work they've done, et cetera. But again, I defer to you.
Well, so many thoughts there. The first is to your point about the talent hoarding. I think some of that just is about how do you um, incentivize, the leadership and people managers with new metrics that are more pointed to the success of the people under their on their teams. And if you're all if everyone on your team is successful, you're that's a good sign that you're a really effective leader, right? And so, but you're right, change is hard, and that's hard for people. On the AI front, I think one of the things that's interesting is right now one of the trending topics within AI and generative AI is what people refer to as agentic workflows. So multiple agents working in concert inside of a given workflow or process where once it knows enough about how to act, some of it could be still rules based, but maybe, if this happens, then do this. But as it gets more intelligent and it knows how an expert in a particular role makes certain human impacting decisions, I'll say, just to because we'll talk about the responsible AI concept a little bit later. But even just thinking about how these agents can potentially talk to each other, I think people have that scares a lot of people because you're taking away their agency and their decision making power. They don't have necessarily a lot of authority, decision making authority within an organization, but they are empowered to make certain lower level, less impactful, decisions, I suppose, just daily decisions. And if you take that away too, then you're going to get some level of backlash. But one of the things I think is interesting is there people are coming up with these concepts where you could the average user will interface with one primary agent, almost like a general contractor, and then that agent will be smart enough to actually know which agent to tap to execute the task that it thinks that you need executed. And so that's many steps beyond where we see a lot of the technology these days. But I just think it's interesting that this is going to be able to figure out what is the next best agent to do a certain task. And we're still, as humans, still trying to catalog each of our individual skills. It almost seems like we're trying to over engineer the human side of things and perhaps not under engineer, but assume too much of technology, and that's where the responsible AI piece is gonna come in. But I know we're not machine. I mean, we are sort of machines, but we're not digital labor like AI and automation. And so, and I'm not saying they should be traded equal, but it's just interesting to see some parallels in about the way we think about execution of tasks. And we are wedded to these old models of, this is what the role is, and if that role changes more than 10% or whatever, we need to rethink. Maybe we need another person, or maybe we need to redefine the role. I mean, I think a lot of what you're talking about gets into some of what John Boudreau and Robin were talking about in work deconstruction and things like that, which are fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were all doing this work all around the same time. And to be fair, John Boudreau was working on this future of work project with Kelly and I. So we were all like drinking from the same Kool-Aid at that time. But yeah, the idea is we can deconstruct tasks. And, I will argue on that job description front, most people's jobs very quickly change from the job description they were hired into. So the idea that, this job description is the be all and end all that really defines the work that I do is crazy, because work changes and the team changes and what you need people to do change, and it just evolves. And that's okay, but we just think that it's this job description.
So I'm 100% with you. I think this JD job description to resume matching thing is just faulty from the start. And using AI to customize your resume and just apply willy nilly to any job that looks remotely like a match on the candidate side is just adding more noise to the problem. But given your IO psychology background, I mean, I guess I put a lot of stock in soft, human skills, because I think those are the more durable skills. They're also the skills that allow you to be, adaptable and to sort of, I guess morph your own, capability as your role changes, which, like you said, can change within a few weeks from what the job description says, if that was accurate, to begin with. So I guess I'm curious how you think about, because the skills, I know we talked about this once before, but we talk about skills-based hiring and hiring for potential, this is not just about whether or not you have a 4-year degree or not. This is about all the untapped and hidden potential that's out there in talent pools that aren't getting tapped, or to the point we were talking about before, even inside an organization. This person's in a particular role. That's because they were looking for any job out of college. But I mean, do you even know what they're capable of? So I feel like assessments, both pre-hire and you know um, talent assessments with once you're an employee, should carry a lot of weight. Not to mention the unstructured data and the way knowledge is shared and flowed within an organization from a social network analysis and knowledge graph kind of standpoint. There's gold in there.
Yeah. I'm going to tie kind of the conversation around talent marketplaces and the skills first thing together. Um, I refer to these talent marketplaces actually as equal opportunity platforms. And it really comes from my history of helping companies design career management systems.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, "Can we see more candidates?" Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
What if I told you that your boss skydives, Tim in marketing is a magician, and Sam in accounting does sums in his head while standing on his hands? Seeing sides of the people you work with but never see, sides that inform and inspire their work and that can inspire yours, is what The Talent Show is all about. Email me, Tom Alexander, host of The Talent Show, at talentshow@backboneinc.com and show us what you got. I look forward to seeing you on The Talent Show.
And also seeing how people kind of tend to advance through their organization. And it tends to be, those people who are politically connected, who look like everybody else, are the ones who get access to the kinds of opportunities that help them to develop themselves. Well, a talent marketplace is super cool because it connects people to opportunities based on the skills that they have, not who they know. And so, when people talk about, diversity, equity, inclusion, principles within a company, I say, well, you need to have systems and processes that actually facilitate that. You can't train your way to diversity, right? You need systems that create more fairness in your processes. And I think a talent marketplace is one of those things that really does, because it's based on the skills that you have. And I love it from that perspective, because it really does help everybody both be able to see the opportunities that are available to them, but also to be able to, kind of figuratively raise their hand and express interest in an opportunity that perhaps previously they wouldn't even know about. So I think that's really important from a skills first hiring standpoint. So I mentioned I'm the chair of the board for the SHRM Foundation, and we have a very big skills first initiative in helping companies understand that talent strategy to hire people who are perhaps skilled through alternative sources. They're called STARS, skilled through alternative systems or something. But the issue is, we come out of school today, and I hate to use this example, but I had a cat sitter who had a degree in computer science, and she couldn't find a job, even though she as a newly minted computer science student because she didn't actually have the technical skills in particular areas that people were hiring for. So just because you have a degree doesn't mean that you have the skills my company is looking for. So then she was going to a boot camp to learn how to be a data analyst or learn how to program in Python or whatever it was, learn AI. And people are now getting all these certifications in these areas where we need deep technical talent, and skills are changing so quickly in the workplace that we need to widen our aperture of how we access talent. And if we are looking for the skills that we're hiring for and not using proxies like college degree, we can now get access to a broader pool, which turns out to be a more demographically diverse pool of talent because there are a lot of people. It turns out there's something like 62% of US people who are, employable in the US don't have a college degree. So why would you cut out over half of your potential talent pool in a time where we're under one of the greatest labor challenges that we've ever had? We do not have enough people to fill the roles that we have. And I hate to tell you, it's only going to get worse from here if you look out into the future on the demographics. So we need to find other ways of accessing talent, and focusing on skills helps us bring people into employment situations that let people rise up um, based on their initiative in going out and getting these credentials, or learning skills through, whether it be apprenticeships or other ways. So I'm very passionate, obviously. The foundation's doing this work to help companies understand that talent strategy, but I'm very passionate in helping companies recognize that with the talent shortages that we have, we need new strategies that help us gain access to a broader pool of talent.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that have to happen simultaneously. I mean, one of those is, like you said, casting a much wider net, and not limiting yourself to anything that would fall prey to one of many human biases in the process. But I also think you've got to break down those traditional sort of work structures and the mindset around, well, this is how we operate. We want, how are we supposed to enhance our culture or improve the employee experience if, we're hiring contingent labor, or we're hiring, whatever the excuse might be. But the fact is, if you recognize that you have work to be done and you want to bring the most, the best available talent in the most optimal way to do that, then you have to open the aperture and you have to look 360 degrees around. So one of the questions I have for you is, like, as people think about that and you say, okay, yes, like, okay, you sold me. We need to start moving towards this internal talent marketplace thing. But what about, who owns that? First of all, does talent acquisition have some ownership of that? Because technically we're saying we're going to fill roles not just by, fishing in a new pond, but we're going to look amongst our midst, and potentially fill roles that way. And then you also have the contingent labor, freelance, contract labor, et cetera, which oftentimes isn't even owned by HR. It's owned by vendor management, which might be under procurement, or even, the CIO's office if it's mostly technical talent. I don't know. But you have these now you have people potentially, jockeying for for a position of who is in charge of what percentage of the net new, labor, or I guess just the dynamics that go with this true workforce ecosystem that tries to break down those silos. I mean, how have you seen companies try to address that, if they have?
Not a lot have, is the short answer. But I wrote an article about this recently about managing your talent ecosystem using kind of skills as a means to do a better job of managing your entire talent ecosystem. So this is really an issue. Talent acquisitions responsible for hiring new employees. Procurement is responsible for bringing in contract labor like a consulting firm or something. And then it turns out that managers are getting so frustrated that they can't, find the talent that they need and the timeline that they need, that they're going out to open talent platforms like uh, TopTal or Upwork, and they're just, hiring contract talent from a talent platform. So it's all over the board and it's inefficient. And to your question, who owns this? Is it talent acquisition? Is it talent management, or more specifically, learning and development? Because it's actually we use our talent marketplace for development purposes, or is it outside of HR altogether, and it's kind of some sort of uh, organization in charge of organization effectiveness? If you're really looking at becoming more agile as a company. So there are a lot of different hands in the pot. I believe that all those people need to work together. And really, talent acquisition has to be working, and talent acquisition and talent management jointly have to be working with managers to help them understand all the different ways that they can source talent. We can bring in a full time employee, we can bring in a contractor, we can, that's like kind of here more full time on this job, or we can hire somebody from a talent platform. And by the way, if these are the skills that you're looking for, these are the specific platforms that you should be looking at, because it turns out that these open marketplace talent platforms are becoming really specialized. Like, this is where you go to find developers. This is where you go to find engineers. This is where you go to find more administrative help or graphics design skills. So we need to look at this more holistically to better manage our entire talent ecosystem and understand financially, like, how are we managing this? Sometimes, and there was an article recently from Diane Garrison and Linda Groton in Harvard Business Review, that, if you will, kind of built on the article that I was talking about, that said, there are some people today that have such awesome and high demand skills. They don't want to work for the man. They don't want to work for a company. The only way you're going to be able to access the talent is by hiring them in some sort of on demand fashion. They work off of a platform. You can hire them to do a project, and then they'll go away unless you have a really compelling case for them to stay on and do another project. And we need to understand that. And we need to understand sometimes our company needs that talent, and that's the only way we're going to access them. You can put that job opening up there and try and hire that person, but not being able to fill that role for 3, 6, 9, 12 months does not help your company. Understanding how to access that talent is really important. And so, I think that these teams need to come together and they need to develop an entire talent ecosystem strategy and how they collectively work together to get the right talent that helps a company to execute on its strategy.
Yeah, no, I think that's critically important, and I have firsthand experience in that situation. I mean, that's what happened when I was working as a chief of staff to the VP of software engineering at NBC, and it was taking 4 or 6 months for me to work through staffing agents, through vendor management, through different staffing agencies, constantly giving them updates on what projects we've got, and going through interviews and not finding someone. I'm like, this is not sustainable. Like, is this how HR works? Actually, I shouldn't even say that, because HR at the time, talent acquisition just said good luck, because we were hiring. We did not have approval for full time hiring, so talent acquisition just said, best of luck. I said, oh, okay, well, we have our contracts say if we like this person, we can hire them in as soon as a month. So basically, I'm going to come back to you next month and say we just hired people, and they completely bypassed talent acquisition. I just want to make sure you're clear that that's exactly what's going to happen. So that's where my proposal, perhaps because subconsciously I was thinking about your book. I was like, this is not working. We need to find resources. There's engineering teams all over the Comcast family of companies. So you can't tell me that there's not a handful of senior software engineers who could very well just walk out the door if you don't give them a principal, opportunity to lead a new team in a different domain. And so that's one thing. And the other was I was developing automation strategy, and I said, well, who are the people that might be most susceptible to disruption because of that automation that we're planning? And can I assess their capability to be reskilled in a more technical role? And let's do all of these things at the same time, because otherwise, at the time they were working on Peacock, right? And they had a deadline. They told the public when Peacock was coming out. So it's like, guys, this isn't just like a self-imposed. Oh, we want to get this done by April or whatever. Like you told everyone and your shareholders that this streaming service is coming. So you either start thinking about how you add agility to your talent strategy and you think differently about where and how to identify skills and potential, or you're going to get disrupted and you're going to lose talent to other, media and entertainment.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point, which is sometimes your employees have skills that they'd like to use, and then you bring in a contractor to do that project. It's really disheartening when all the really cool projects go to somebody outside of the company. And so, as a means of retaining your top talent, it's giving them the opportunity to work on this other exciting new project. I mean, who inside wouldn't want to work on the cool new, Peacock strategy? Uh, and we so often will just bring in a contractor to work on that, and that doesn't make your existing employees really happy.
So I guess that's going to be one of the challenges, not unlike some of the sort of cultural challenges with successfully implementing or adopting a talent marketplace, which is if your full-time employees feel like you were too quick to go out and hire net new employees or to bring in that contractor who could be converted at some point if mutually agreed upon could be converted, and instead so you're not giving current employees who have been loyal to the company supposedly, uh, you're not giving them sort of first right of first refusal for some of those jobs.
Yeah. One strategy that I really love is from my friends at Tata Communications. They really focused on how do we build capability within the organization, particularly in these new skill areas where we just don't have it resident within the company. And so they have a very specific strategy called an action learning program. If they're going to bring in an external contractor because somebody has those deep special technical skills that we just don't have within the company, they then put in a project team around that person. But as part of the remit of that project is for that contractor to infuse those skills or upskill the other employees in that technical area. So they're learning while doing this important work, right? It's, the whole idea around upskilling your talent, but really specifically being mindful when you're bringing in an external contractor, build the capability internally so that in the future you don't have to hire that external contractor. You'll have that capability inside the company. And I think that's a very smart talent strategy.
No, I agree. And if I guess thinking about when I think about AI, people sort of gaining AI expertise. I guess this will lead into our AIQ discussion, but I think there's part of this is around literacy. What can AI do so that I can use it in my planning and my brainstorming and all of these creative ways, and also learning how to use it fairly responsibly. Um, but then you've got another angle around the actual skills, like to actually hands to keyboard, learn how to interact, prompt it to get what you need from it and things like that. So there's a lot of facets that go into this, but if you provide that training, first of all, you should do it anyway because AI is on everyone's device already. So you either teach them how to, it's like giving them their computer for the first time.
Welcome to the human role. your go to podcast where HR and payroll collide with innovation. I'm your host, Tiana Neal, and every month I'm diving deep with industry experts and change makers, bringing you real talk insights, practical tips, and fresh takes you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a leader, practitioner, or just curious about the latest HR and payroll trends, I've got you covered. Ready to roll with the best? Tune in for fresh perspectives, actionable tips, and the knowledge you need to roll forward with confidence. Subscribe now and let's transform the way you work.
In the late '80s or whenever it was. But you either give them the tools to use it and use it responsibly. And I guess I where I'm going is that's you can almost nudge everyone in the right direction and make them more competitive by doing the upskilling or the reskilling or whatever with AI. You make them more competitive, and then you don't have to. Then the organization will be less likely to look outside, especially if they're looking for AI, literacy and AI skills, because people have taken the initiative, they had a learning mindset, and they put themselves, with our help, they put themselves on this path that said, I will not be disrupted. I really like what I do. I know I can do it even better with AI, and I'm going to position myself so maybe you don't want to go external, or maybe so your smart, super smart algorithms can detect that we have the skills internally that we need, and we can be, we've already taught ourselves how to fish, so you don't have to go start over. So on that, since I teed it up there, when you saw the title of my podcast here, Elevate Your AIQ, what are some things that came to mind?
I have a personal mantra, which is always be learning. And I think elevating your AIQ is really about being curious. It's about taking the opportunity to being, kind of willing to experiment with what is this AI tool? What can it do for me? I'm one of those firm believers that uh, AI is not coming for your job, but the person using AI is the person who's coming for your job, right? It's a enhancer to us. It's augmented intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. It's not taking away, but it's augmenting, kind of what you do. So I think really looking for the specific tools that will help you do what you do better. Might be faster. So I know everyone's really focused on productivity, but the deep experts that I know in AI say, yes, there's a productivity piece to this, but it's really more about better decision making. It's about um, having a tool that will help me think critically. So it's about breaking work down and figuring out, where do I add the most value in this work equation, and what's just kind of a routine thing. I love, I had a conversation with the head of HR at Microsoft, and they said they talk about using their Copilot solution, to uh, remove the toil and bring more joy to your work. Like, what is it about your work that is just like, oh my God, I have to do that task again? Maybe that task can be automated. And so you can remove the toil from your work so that you can spend time doing things that bring you more joy. That, I love solving problems. So, how can I use the technology to help me solve problems better? But also, how do I remove the more administrivia from my day to day work so that I can focus more of the time where I truly do add value? And so I think elevating your AIQ is both, it's the knowledge about what tools are available to you. It's being curious and experimenting with it to see what you can do.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Yeah, I harp on this productivity thing. I mean, I know everyone wants to be more productive, and being more productive makes you look good and whatever. But in some ways, I feel like I've said this to a couple people, but I just feel like individual productivity, when we know we all work in teams as part of a broader mission. It just, I don't know, to me, it just looks like a vanity metric kind of thing.
Well, I, I'm going to share like a real specific example of how I'm using AI to use my time better, which is I'm looking for these tools that just make things work smoother and easy. Yes, I use ChatGPT, occasionally create an outline for a training. Not that I need the outline, but sometimes that outline makes me think of something that I wasn't initially going to put in my outline. So I use it as to spark an idea. But I've now connected a Calendly, and there are 1,000 of these, so I don't mean to promote anybody's particular product, but a calendar system with my Zoom. I use Zoom. Other people use Teams or whatever. But now, when somebody wants to schedule a meeting with me, I used to go back and forth. What dates do you have available? No, I'm not available on those dates. What dates, other dates do you have available? And it kind of takes time, go back and forth, and then, finally agree on something. Now I have to go into my Zoom account and I have to like set up the meeting, and then I have to send you a meeting invite. Now I send somebody a link to my calendar, they make an appointment, and it automatically sets up that, so it's something simple, but it really does free up minutes. It's not hours of my time, but now I can spend my time doing things where I add more value and I don't have to focus on that administrative part. I spend a lot of time listening to webinars. I, like you, Bob, you know, think of myself as a thought leader, but you can't be a thought leader if you're not hearing kind of the latest and greatest of what's coming out from other people as well. And it's really important for me to stay up to date. But I'm spending so much time reading research reports, spending time on webinars where I'm just looking for those one or two nuggets, right? So now I'm sending my AI agent to those webinars, and it gives me a summary, and I can figure out my key points from that summary. That frees up an hour of my time. So it's really about understanding where the technology can do something. You think of it as another employee. Um, Sometimes you might have an intern who's doing some research for you. I can ask my AI agent to do that research for me. That will make it faster. Trust but verify. Even an intern makes mistakes, so you always got to verify everything. But I just kind of went on and on. But I think it is really possible that we can use AI to make ourselves not only more efficient and increase productivity, but also be able to spend time on the things that bring you more joy and let you use your human skills more.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you went there, because as you're talking, I'm just thinking, my statement is, I guess, more for a worker inside an organization where they're part of a team. So imagine you've got a workflow with, it hits, crisscrosses four other roles in your swim lane, process map. Um, if you're working at 5x, speed, but everyone else is still at normal speed, then the end to end, value creation isn't necessarily occurring, right? So that's why it'd be great if everybody sort of, improved their own, throughput, and but with quality and accuracy and effectiveness as well. But you're right. I mean, as a independent advisor, solopreneur, there's a lot of things that I just there's literally just not enough hours in the day. So if there are calls, like you said, if there's calls that you need to be on, but you also have, deadlines with a client or what have you, you can't be at two places at once, then absolutely, as long as the host of that webinar doesn't kick you out for having your AI there, and you're not there, so it's not really your co-pilot, it's your digital twin, if you will. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of use cases where it absolutely makes sense. And the other thing about, I guess, the shortcoming of productivity, like, just because it saves you 5 minutes, that may not sound like a lot, but first of all, if you scale that and it's 5 minutes every hour or whatever, right? It really adds up. the other is it doesn't account productivity metric doesn't account for potentially the frustration level with that 5 minutes. Like why didn't you accept one of the five time windows that I gave you? You got to come back with a sixth option. So now it's another back and forth. So sometimes the time alone doesn't even tell you how much your mind could be more at ease if some of those things were off your plate. So yeah, there's a lot that AI can do for us if we learn to work with it.
I personally, I'm diving in. I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm excited, about the possibilities. I do think it's going to change the way we work, but uh, they talk about eliminating jobs. I think in some cases, we might have fewer positions, but people have deep domain expertise. And we need that domain expertise, even guided with additional tools that can help us do stuff. Like, I'm really excited now. I can create my own graphics because I know how to use Midjourney. But somebody who is a graphics designer will be far better at that task than me because they have a vision. They have a creative skill set I just don't have. I'm a scientist by training. I'm not a creative person. And so those people inherently need to be in that role still, aided by the technology. But um, it's a very exciting time to see what we can do better, maybe faster, um, and again, how we spend more time doing the things where we truly add value. You think of, a customer service job can be so improved by the access to AI technology that can help them get access to the right answers quickly for customers. It improves the customer experience. It improves the employee experience. There's just so many great examples out there about how AI can make work better. I think it's a very exciting time.
I completely agree. Edie, it has been a pleasure as always. That's about all the time we have for today. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective. It was really informative and insightful. So thank you.
I always love talking to you, Bob. Anytime. I hope this was helpful for you listeners.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. We will see you next time. Thank you again, Edie.